Okay, so what I'm going to talk about now is about Scylla Monitoring, focusing on the latest 3.0. And I'll mention a few stuff from 3.1 that is just behind the corner. And those are the stuff that we're going to talk about. First, a quick look on our monitoring stack. So if you're not familiar with our monitoring stack, then you should. As Glober mentioned, you must monitor your system. It's helpful, it's good. We have a nice monitoring stack. It's open source. We use Prometheus, if you're familiar with that, for collecting matrices. And Scylla is Prometheus has a native API for metrics. You can connect to it directly if you want to. We use Grafana for dashboards representation. It's also very nice if you're familiar with that. We also use Alert Manager for spreading alerts, and you can connect. Prometheus can generate alerts. You can use the Alert Manager to send emails, to send Slack notification, PagerDuty, all that stuff. All those things are part of our monitoring stack. Okay, first, version upgrade. Everything here on the list was upgraded. We're trying to keep up with the changes. Most notable is Grafana 6. For those of you who follow Grafana, they have really nice things out there with the Grafana 6, a new way for plugins, and beside the overall look and feel that it was updated, they also have additional options for future changes that they are planning to do and allows user to do, and we're gonna use that as well. We keep up with, of course, with our own Scylla Enterprise and Scylla Open Source for the latest versions. And Scylla Manager, next version is just, again, also behind the corner, and we're going to use that. Last thing, Python was a pain for some users. And by default, it's no longer a dependency. We are moved to Python 3, but if you're not changing your own dashboards, and usually that's the case, you no longer need Python, and that's nice. The major change in Scylla 3, Scylla Monitoring 3, was the dashboard reorganization. Over the last few years that we have our monitoring solution, it just kept growing, and we decided to make some order in that. In general, we have the overview dashboard that gives you an overview, high level of the dashboard. You can quickly look at it and knows what's going on. If things are working and if something is really bad, you notice it immediately. The detailed dashboards give you a detailed view of a single or multiple nodes. It's a lot more information, but it has, if you see that something is wrong and you want to know what's happening at the node level, it allows you to. CQL, I'm going to talk about it in a second, and Alternator again. Manager is the Scylla Manager dashboard, and the OS gives you an OS level view of a node. So it's disk and network and stuff like that. We have two new dashboards. The first one that I'm talking about is CQL. If anyone here was in last year's conference, maybe you attended Shlomi's talk about CQL optimization. It's based on that. The CQL dashboard has two parts. The first is a simple CQL view of the system, like insert, delete, and all that stuff, which is pretty straightforward. The second and interesting one is the CQL optimization part. The idea is to try and help user identify that they have a problem, that they have a potential problem, let's say, with either their data model, their connections. And that's something that a lot of the people that talked about, like the users that talked about, mentioned, like, is your drivers are shard aware? Do you have problem with page queries? So the idea is you have multiple gauges, and by default, gauges are supposed to be 0. If it's not 0, then you should check why it's not 0, because maybe you have a problem. For example, on the upper, I don't know if it's right, upper left corner, or upper right corner, you see that all the queries here are not paged. And that's a potential problem. So by quick look, you should see that you have a potential problem, and then you can hover over the description. It explains what is the potential problem that you have there, and do you need to change something. It's worth looking at, especially when you're developing your application, but also from time to time, use a CQL dashboard, have a quick look, and if there's something that is not on 0, try to understand why. Because you do have, maybe you have a potential resource loss, maybe you're working too hard, maybe you have extra latencies just because something is wrong. Second is the alternator. We've mentioned it multiple times in different talks. It's the DynamoDB compatible API. And it's in a single dashboard. If you're coming from the Dynamo API world, you can look at just on that dashboard. It gives you an overview of the cluster as well, but also it looks on the different operation from the Dynamo perspective, like data plane actions and data plane latencies and all that things that if you're familiar with Dynamo, you'll find it familiar. We add additional few alerts, and one of them is for low disk. We had one of the things with the monitoring is that we keep getting requests either from the field or in the last year also from the Scylla as a service, the DBAS. And we try to use those feedback and add that to our own dashboard and monitoring stack. So we have two new alerts. One of them is for low disk space. And the second is for the SQL connectivity that is based on our own manager. I was asked to add a few slides about how to add your own alert, because you can do that as well. Alerts are on the Prometheus level. It's part of the Prometheus configuration. An alert is basically a structure of, it has a name. It describes that something has happened. It describes for how long, and then what to report. So if you look at an alert, and this is an example for an alert for when a node is down, you see that the alert name is instance down. That reflects that a node is unreachable. We have an expression. You set an expression. In this case, the up matrix is an internal matrix for Prometheus that's stating that are you able to connect to a node or not. You state that the duration, that is for 30 seconds, you were unable to connect to that node. And then you can, if you want to, you can add additional labels and annotation with description and summary that will appear eventually in the alert. This is a nice addition that came from both Grafana latest changes and will be part of our 3.1 release, Scylla Monitoring 3.1, not to confuse with Scylla 3.1. And that's the use of annotations. Annotations are a marker on the graph that allows you to explain when something is wrong. So think about a restart, and that's the annotation that is here. Let's say that a node has restarted for some reason. If you look at any of other metrics, it's hard to understand that something was wrong because the node was down, the node is back again. There's no active alert on that because it's up and running. But if you look at the graph, let's say the load or the request, you see that there was a drop. And annotation helps you to understand that something has happened. If you hover an annotation, it explains what happened at that point of time. And we're going to add more, and you can add more yourself. And last, we have a tighter monitoring manager integration. Scylla Manager 2.0 is just about to release, and one of the nice things that we did is Scylla Manager now has a console API, if you're familiar with the console API, and there's a tighter integration, so now with Scylla, the latest monitor and the latest manager, you can drop all the configurations that you need to keep of the different nodes, and Scylla Monitoring will be able to read it directly from the Scylla Manager. And with that, we'll switch to Mikhail and Scylla Manager.